don't know how I'm going to do this. Hey, right. Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the Roker Report podcast in association with the Sunderland Community Soup Kitchen. It's Gav back at a ridiculous hour as we talk about the just announced departure of Tony Mowbray as Sunderland manager. This comes as a little bit of a shock. I mean, I felt like it was coming at some point. I wasn't expecting it at this time of night. And, well, everything's gone out the window. We had a podcast recorded, ready to go out in reaction to the two games we've played in recent days. And, we kind of had to throw that one in the bin and throw all of our articles for the website in the bin for the morning because this has just thrown everything to pot. Joining me tonight is Martin. Hiya, mate.
Hello, mate. Yeah, we meet again. As you say, we recorded one in reaction to the Millwall game, and I guess some of the themes that we talked about there will be picked up in this conversation, won't they? Because it's happened a lot quicker than we thought it might. We thought he was treading on thin ice, and his comments after the game certainly suggested he was kind of going into bat for himself and trying to do that PR thing that managers sometimes do and deflecting a bit of the blame away from himself. But no, it certainly happened a lot quicker than I thought it would, and the timing of it suggests that there's somebody lined up. They've got something lined up ready to go. So we'll see how it all goes, and hopefully this pod will get out and people will listen to it before they announce the next chapter of our managerial history.
Yeah, well, on that pod, which is now sadly dead, we actually joked about the fact that we have to sack Tony Mowbray before we play Newcastle because it's just the way things are when you go into a game against Newcastle. And I am thrown by the timing, but I'm not shocked at all. I think when he came out and said what he said, basically about the recruitment after the game and the manner in which he's expected to play certain players, I think he revealed too much.
Yeah.
I think he said too much, and that won't have went down well. I'm sure he was already treading on thin ice. I'm pretty sure he probably knew this was coming. I don't think Tony Mowbray will be shocked that he's lost his job. And I'm a little bbit annoyed because there was a chance that they could have flipped the switch in the summer, and there were rumours in the summer that we were going to replace Tony Mowbray with a different coach, and obviously his stock was pretty high at the time. We were doing really well. We'd just come off the back of a playoff finish, and it was met with a unanimously negative response because everybody felt that he'd done enough to sort of take the team forward. And it just feels like this is something that's probably been in the offing for a while, and they've been waiting for a chance to do it. And yeah, it's sad because I quite like Tony Mowbray. I think he's a good man. I think we've had some managers down the years who really haven't cared about Sunderland, and I think he's genuinely came in and he's embraced the club. He's embraced the fan base, and he knows what it's like to be from the Northeast because he grew up in the Northeast, and he's definitely sort of been able to link what we see on the pitch to the way that the fans think and want to see the team play football. However, you can't ignore the recent form. You can't. We've lost 5 games from our last 9, 2 wins in 9, 2 draws, one of which was against a team who had 10 men for most of the game. So the form is certainly not great. And after losing 2 games we should have won and then just about scraping by against Millwall, I said after the game, it's a little bit annoying that nobody gets to hear us say these things, but but I said that I think that the penalty which we got in the Millwall game probably saved his bacon for another week, because I thought he would be sacked straight after the Millwall game had we lost it.
Yeah.
So I'm not totally shocked by this news, but at the same time, the timing is suspicious. And like I say, it could well be that they've already got something ready to go. And, the way things are now, I would suspect they have. But I'm sad for Tony Mowbray because I think he's done a great job. He'll come out of this with his head held high. He'll get another championship job, I'm sure, if he wants one. He has been in the game a long time and he might want some time off. But tinged with sadness, but I think it's probably the right thing that it's happened.
No, I agree with you. And I was thinking back to when those rumours happened in the summer. I think it was about Farioli, wasn't it? It was the one who was linked. who's gone on to do a brilliant job at Nice. So there's little chance of getting him out of France at this point. But it's no accident that those rumours occurred. The club were obviously sort of testing the water, testing opinion, gauging opinion around Tony Mowbray. Now, he came in at at that point where Alex Neil had departed for Stoke, and his remit was to stabilise us, keep us up, and he's done a really good job. I think for that point in our history, in that chapter of our history, he's done a really good job. There's question marks over his some of his tactical stuff, certainly this season, and more so in recent weeks, where he hasn't been able to figure out a solution. He's rarely had a plan B. He's chucked subs on willy-nilly trying to affect the game, and they rarely do. So there's been a few things this season especially that have kind of made you think about his long-term future. And I think we all were of the opinion that he was the right person at the right time to stabilise the club, get young players into the team, give them a chance. Look how Jack Clark's developed under Tony Mowbray. Under Alex Neil in League One, he was barely getting a kick. He was on the he played a few games, didn't he? But he was on the subs bench for the playoff final. He was playing wing back at the start of last season, and he wasn't really firing. And you look at the improvement in Clark under Tony Mowbray's management. So there's an awful lot of positives that he's delivered for us. But I think almost unanimously, everybody was of the opinion that he wasn't going to be a manager who wins promotion with Sunderland. He was going to be a manager who stabilises us, gets us, into the playoffs last season. I think, he's probably been a bit of a victim of his own success and circumstance because, yes, we finished in the playoffs last season, but I think, when we looked back at points totals, the points total that we got last season wouldn't have got us into the playoffs 11 times out of the past 12 seasons. So, it was a low points total for a playoff finish. And we had somebody like Ahmad who could pull a worldie out of nowhere and win us points, which he frequently did last season, and we've struggled without this season. So I think ultimately it comes down to form and results, because regardless of anything else on that's happening with the club, regardless of the strategy that we got, regardless of the fact that we're developing young players and all that sort of stuff, the results have got to be good.
Yeah.
We talked after the Huddersfield game, and the results that we've got recently, you said 2 wins out of 9 or whatever it is, it's relegation form. If you spin that out over a full season, it's relegation form. And we just don't show any signs of getting out of that run of form. And that run of form has been against clubs who are in sort of bottom third primarily of the league. So we've been crap over the last few weeks, and Mowbray has paid the price.
Yeah, he has ultimately paid the price, like we say. Very, very sad to see him go. I am sad to see him go because I think he's done a brilliant job. Good bloke, he's not leaving here with anybody sort of gunning for him or anything like that. I just think that sometimes things come to a natural end, and a lot of people might not like us saying that, but I do feel like they've probably looked at the sort of trajectory of the season and they've thought, we're going to have to just try something else here because, I don't think he was getting the best from the squad, certainly recently, and more crucially, the noises he was making and the sort of things we were seeing from the sideline suggested to me he perhaps wasn't willing to adapt to make things work. It was all very much, this is the way we do things, and I'm not going to change necessarily. And there will have been noting everything that we're seeing.
No, of course, yeah.
throughout the season. So it's sad. It's sad to see him go. But I like I say, I can totally understand it. Maybe people won't like me saying that, but I think it's just the way things go.
It's interesting though, isn't it? Because I'm a little bit older than you, so you kind of looking back to the 80s and 90s, and managers were given time, and I think there is, and I think it's not just Sunderland; it's common throughout football, right? We go through a bad spell of results, and managers pay the price. Now, yes, of course, they're ultimately responsible for what happens on the field, but there is part of me that thinks if we didn't make the change in the summer, we ride it out this season. And again, we talked last week about the run of fixtures that we've gotten. We're struggling to break teams down who get everybody behind the ball and sit back and try to catch us on the break. Whereas the games that we've got coming up, especially the likes of Leeds and Hull and people like that, they'll come at us. And they're the games that are actually more suited to our style of play, even though we're playing against teams who are higher in the league and performing better. So, there's always a chance that you go through that set of games and you actually get a decent set of results and you're back on track. Now, the thing with Mowbray, which, so we kind of know that Kirill and Speakman and the board are pretty ruthless. We saw it with Lee Johnson. A couple of bad results. We were top of the league, couple of bad results, or one terrible result, and he's out. So, they are ruthless when they've decided to act. The thing with Mowbray, and we've seen it all the way through, and I think it's just him, isn't it? He comes across as a very emotional manager, and he has these periods where you listen to some press conferences, and he's upbeat and positive, and he's talking really enthusiastically about the players and about the games coming up. And it tends to be when we get good results, and we get good results after he's talked like that. Often something must have gone on behind the scenes, and he's down, dour. You can't get any enthusiasm out of him. And he's been like that for the past month. And we saw it, when we saw it last time, we saw it in that run of results before we played Stoke. And he was bemoaning the fact Ross Stewart was injured and all this sort of stuff. He was just down. He was depressed, whether it's clinical or not, probably not. But he came across as if he was depressed about the whole situation. We got beat off Stoke, hammered off Stoke. And his mood suddenly changed because he realised, oh shit, I've got to lift these players up. And we went on a decent run of form and then results. And he's been that really sort of down manager over the past month. And that's just been reflected in the results now. Whether he's frustrated with the quality of players he's been given to work with, because obviously he has little say in the players that are brought in, we're led to believe, or whatever it is, or something else is going on behind the scenes. But if that's coming across to us as fans, it's going to be coming across to the players. So, obviously the people who've made the call are far more in tune with what's going on day to day at the club, and they've seen the need to change it. So it'll be interesting to see what happens next, because, Speakman often talks about having plans, having people lined up, having short lists, talking to managers, and it would be irresponsible not to do so and all that sort of thing. And, I think it was even last season, it was the Birmingham game, where he had Struber, the Austrian fella who was at Barnsley. He was sat alongside him in the director's box, and apparently he hooked up with Kirill Louis-Dreyfus in America over the summer. So, that's certainly one person who they've spoken to over the last year. And I'm sure there'll be others too. So, yeah, but it's not a surprise. Ultimately, it's the results. And, you pair that with his demeanour over the last month. And, all things considered, I actually think it's a shame, because I like him. And he comes across well, and he felt right. You get, as you say, you get some managers like Moyes who you can tell just don't want to be here, and they can't wait to get out of here. And Mowbray felt different. He felt like a good fit, and he was. As I say, he did a good job. But I think it's time now, if we want to achieve anything this season, that we've had to change it up.
Yeah, well, you mentioned Christian Speakman there, so I might as well read through his statement, and then we can have a little chat on what we think about what they've said. So this is from Christian Speakman. He said, all at SAFC have thoroughly enjoyed working with Tony, and he is quite rightly held in high regard by our players and staff and our supporters. After arriving at an uncertain time, he helped guide us to the Sky Bet Championship playoffs and played an important role in developing our team. This was a difficult decision to make, but we remain loyal to our ambition and strategy, which I think is key, because he did question that in those post-match comments. Yeah. And felt that now was the right moment to take this step. We are now focused on identifying the right candidate, and we will continue to support our coaching team and players throughout the interim period. Kirill Louis-Dreyfus then added, I would like to place on record my gratitude to Tony for his hard work and commitment to Sunderland, a place where he will always be welcome. As custodians of our great club, we believe in our long-term strategy. Yet again, there's the strategy mentioned, that we hope will ensure sustainability and success for SAFC. Central to that approach is a relentless demand for a high-performance culture to be implemented throughout the club, and the development of a strong playing identity that you, our loyal supporters, can all be proud of. Again, quite a pointed sentence that. Your continued support will also be fundamental to that process, and we look forward to seeing as many of you as possible at the Stadium of Light throughout the festive period as we enter 2024. I think the big take from that has to be the mention of strategy on more than one occasion. He questioned that strategy publicly.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe this was in the offing. I'm presuming he's had these conversations with a lot more vitriol added in private. But to come out publicly and question the way things are done and basically say, well, this is the way it's done here, and I know what I signed up to, but, I would prefer some experience. Well, you've basically wrote your own P45, in my opinion, when you've done that. As much as I like him, and he admitted himself, he knows what he signed up to. That ain't the way we're going.
No.
You've got to embrace it. And again, this is something we said when we last spoke. We've got a lot of players now from abroad, in particular young players, who, to me, I don't feel have been handled in the best way. And it may well be the next appointment is made with that in mind, in that, right, okay, the next guy through the door has got to look at what he's got at his disposal and get the most from it. Obviously, we can go, there's so much we can go on about here, and I'm not going to do it all in this podcast, but the inability to get the strikers firing, the unwillingness to really change the style of play to fit strikers into the system better, or to create chances differently. The foreign players, a lot of them just aren't getting a proper chance, or they're in and out the team, the odd sub appearance here and there. We haven't seen Bennett for a while. All these things that they'll be looking at these things and saying, we've invested money into some of these players. Like, you need to make the most of them being here. And if there's a view being taken that he's not, it's interesting, isn't it? He mentioned again after the game, he basically said that the sort of impression I got was he was basically saying the directive is that he shouldn't be starting Pritchard and Dak.
Well, that was the impression.
I think he said too much, hasn't he? He said too much ultimately.
Yeah. The part that I would argue against that is that if he's been told that, first of all, that's wrong, because he's got that squad and the experience is a key part of how we need to build that squad. Yes, we prioritise youth players. Yes, we buy younger players and develop them. But you've got to have that smattering of experience, which we've got in Dak and Pritchard. Although I think the club didn't expect Pritchard to still be here at this point, to be perfectly honest. But it is his management of some of the younger players has been puzzling. Bennett's been outcast. We haven't seen him since the triple Maradona turn and cross against Southampton, where he set up Riggs' goal, have we? Hamia's been treated appallingly. And, you look back at him, and he came with a good reputation, did well in pre-season, played an hour or 70 minutes against Ipswich, in which he did all right, and he hasn't started another game, and he apparently he hasn't been showing the best of attitudes in training and all that sort of stuff. But is that as a consequence of him being treated shabbily in terms of selection? So you never know. But I think he hasn't managed those players well. And tellingly, I think on Sunderland's Instagram post that they announced the sacking of Mowbray, the departure of Mowbray, Mason Burstow liked it. So does that tell you something? I think it probably does. But look, again, ultimately, he's not got the best. He's not got anything out of the strikers. Strikers haven't scored a goal. We've got 4 strikers there. We've had strikers all season after playing 6 months the last season without them, and the strikers haven't scored a goal between them. And if the club, if Speakman and the recruitment team are all doing the due diligence on players, doing the research on players that we're led to believe, really making sure that the signs that they bring into the club are right, they've got to stand by that. And look, of course, they're going to get 1 or 2 wrong, but more often than not, they're going to get them right. And there's absolutely no way in the world, if they're doing the right work off the field and research and signings, there's no way in the world that 4 strikers can come in and all of them be duds. It's not possible. So those strikers, there might be 1 who's a dud, or even 2 if they've been really unlucky, but 4 of them, to get to this point, you're in December, and we haven't had a striker score a goal. And that is how the team's set up. This team isn't set up for strikers to score goals. And there was a stat I saw earlier, actually before I read the news about Mowbray, and it showed the percentage of our shots that strikers are having. And in the last 8 games, out of all, even though we've had tons of shots in a lot of the games, there was 20 odd shots at Plymouth or something, and 25 at Swansea or whatever it was. In the last 8 or 9 games, our defenders have actually had more shots on goal than our strikers have, which tells you everything about how we're actually playing, how we're setting up. So you've got that aspect to it. And then, as we touched upon before, tactically, and this has been a common thing throughout his tenure, and it's not this season, it's not this season only, but we haven't had a plan B, have we? We've just gone out, tried to play our game, regardless of what happens. Now that's him. That's not a direct. That's not the strategy of the club. That's not a directive of anybody else. That's him deciding to do that. He hasn't been able to change within the game, and whether that's him. Well, these kids can't adapt to that so quickly. We've just got to concentrate on this because this is where they'll be able to understand. Whatever it is, he hasn't been able to execute any change in our patterns of play, our structure. And, again, after we talked in the Millwall game, we spoke about, yes, we've got attacking problems in terms of the strikers not scoring, but also defensively, we're all over the shop. You've got players storming out of position to try to win the ball on the halfway line. We've got fullbacks going into midfield. We've got goals being conceded that are really, really preventable. And we haven't got that solid base to work from, which every team needs that solid base as a foundation to build upon. And that's Tony Mowbray. So I think there's a lot of things you can question about his time here. And, these are the conversations that Christian Speakman and Kirill Louis-Dreyfus and whoever else will have been having. And, those are the sorts of things that the new head coach will need to address.
On that, where do we go from here? I mean, like I say, I've got a feeling. The statement says that Mike Dodds will lead first team training and match preparations until the process to appoint a new head coach has been concluded. They weren't quick in appointing Alex Neil. They were a little bit quicker when they appointed Mowbray. It was pretty clear they had him lined up. 2 or 3
days, wasn't it?
Yeah. With this, I'm suspecting they've already got somebody ready to go. I know you mentioned Struber before. It might be him. I was just looking before. You only signed a 2-year deal with Red Bull Salzburg in the summer.
Yeah, so he's only been there since the summer, and say Farioli's been at Nice since the summer, and he's doing magnificently well. So
yeah.
I think it would probably be unlikely either of those two would leave their clubs to, and it's unlikely we'd pay compensation. I think
that was what I was about to say. Yeah, we don't. It's not like we've done that. I mean, if they think this guy or anybody, if they think the next coach is worth paying money for, then I'm sure they'll do it. But it is interesting, the timing of this. We're sitting here late at night recording. They could have announced this at any point, really, between sort of Saturday and now. I'm guessing they've had some very frank and honest conversations today, which have made up their mind with regards to Tony Mowbray. I'm sure it'll all come out. I'm sure we'll hear about it. But I think, to be honest, this shows ruthlessness yet again.
Yeah.
You mentioned it before. When Lee Johnson was sacked, 2.5 weeks before, I think it was, we were top of League One.
Well, we'd stuffed Sheff Wed 5-0, hadn't we?
Yeah. We just beat Sheff Wed 5-0, top of the division, went away to Bolton a couple of weeks later, got stuffed. And they must have realised there and then, he's not getting us promoted. They got rid of him. And a lot of people were staggered by it and couldn't believe that he was gone. And to be honest, at the time, I remember I understood the cold-heartedness of it. I was like, yeah, okay, it's the way things are. We move on. And that's pretty much how I feel now. I didn't get a sinking feeling or anything when I read the news about Tony Mowbray, other than that every bit of work we've got going out on the website and the pre-recorded podcast might be dead at this time of night.
Just selfish.
Yeah, selfish reasons. But because I kind of expected it, didn't feel anything sort of negative, really. I just kind of... I am fully bought in to what they're trying to do. I've never denied that. It's not something I would ever deny. Yes, they're going to get things wrong along the way, but they've mostly got things right. So my view on this is that, and you touched on it before, because they're privy to a lot more of what goes on behind the scenes than we are. I trust their judgment. I trust it. They're a close-knit group there, and the coaching staff who've worked under Mowbray, we know that they're, particularly Mike Dodds, Stuart English, those coaches, we know they're Speakman's guys. I'm sure there's a lot of communication between the coaches and the higher ups and even the players. We know Mike Dodds has got a very close relationship with Joe Bellingham.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to say is there's communication between all levels of the club, yeah, from sort of the players up to the coaching staff into the sporting director and the owner. So if there's a problem, I'm presuming there's a problem, basically. No. Presuming there's something has happened to warrant this happening when it has, because a lot of people are shocked. A couple of my mates have said I really wasn't expecting that. I'm sure that other people listening to this weren't expecting to hear that. that Tony Mowbray was out of a job. But to me, there has to have been a very valid reason for them to do this. Whether it's a coach who they cannot pass by coming up, and they're like, right, we have to just act now and get this guy in, or there's a feeling that Tony Mowbray has taken this as far as he can go, and that he's maybe even losing some of the players. Because let's be honest, I know he's got a very polite demeanour and he's very personable because he's a North East lad. He speaks our language. But I can't think of many situations where a manager has publicly criticised and named players as often as he has.
No, that's right.
And has been allowed to get away with it.
Yeah.
It kind of gets brushed over because it's Tony Mowbray, but it shouldn't. And I've highlighted this quite a lot, particularly with him here. Like, whether he's lazy in training or not, I shouldn't know about that. That shouldn't be something you're telling the press and thus telling us as fans about a player. Because what does that do to his confidence? He's done it with Burstow, he's done it with other players where he's come out and, I mean, what he said about those strikers was none of them are good enough. So I'm not surprised Mason Burstow was liking social media posts about him leaving. Because he's basically come out and said he's not good enough.
Yeah.
Which, what does that do for a player's confidence? Those are conversations that he should not have been having with the press. And I was very forthright on that. Even when things were going well at the start of the season when we were winning games, I was coming out and saying, I don't like the way he's talking about him here. I don't think it's fair. I still don't think it's fair. But the problem is results have dipped. And when you're criticising players when results dip, it makes you look even worse.
Yeah.
So, like I say, we're not privy to a lot of what's probably gone on, but you can basically read between the lines with this sacking. I think it was inevitable. Like I say, when we last spoke, I said that I felt the penalty might have saved his job in the Millwall game because at half time, 1-0 down, I thought he's a dead man walking here. Yeah. And it's proved to be true, And your gut feeling was right.
If he hadn't spoken the way he did after the game, maybe he would have kept his job for a little longer. But I think, the comments that he made after the game really signed his own death warrant in a lot of respects, because he completely threw the players and the Speakman Argh recruitment under the bus and deflected any blame whatsoever from himself. And ultimately, as a player and a fan, you can't have that. You don't want your manager doing that. You want him to lead and take responsibility for the things he's responsible for, which is results. And look, you can have some sympathy with him to some extent about some of the recruitment. Yes, he'd like some more experience, but the experience he's brought in, i.e. Bradley Dack, has been awful. And ultimately, the way that we're approaching things hasn't changed since the day he signed up. So it's not as if halfway through his tenure we've gone, okay, we've got a different direction, we're going to take it this way and do this, and he hasn't agreed with it. He knew what he was signing up for. He was on board with it to start with. And, he's obviously not now. And I think, thinking about the timing of it, you've got a day off on Sunday, train on Monday morning, have a meeting early afternoon or whatever with Speakman and Kirill Louis-Dreyfus and whoever else, thrash a few things out, and they've obviously ultimately decided that it's best for him to leave. And whether that was the starting point of the conversation or only the end point, we never know. But the thing now is how long it takes us to get somebody else in. And you say about Lee Johnson, and to me that was more of a reactionary sacking because of the length of time it took to get somebody else in. We went through this whole recruitment process, didn't we, where we were interviewing candidates and psychometric testing or whatever. Psychometric testing Roy Keane would have been an interesting meeting to be in, wouldn't it? But we had quite a long process before Alex Neil was appointed, and results suffered. I think our chance of automatic promotion were actually blown in the way that we handled that sacking and the sacking and the ultimate recruitment. So we obviously learned some lessons from that, because Alex Neil's departure was on paper a shock, but again I don't think that the club were too surprised about that. And we had Mowbray lined up ready to go in a couple of days, so it wouldn't surprise me at all if we had somebody lined up and a new person in the dugout on Saturday against West Brom. Who's it going to be? Chances are it's somebody that we've never heard of, never been mentioned, never considered. John Eustace is one who obviously left Birmingham early in the season, out of work. Younger coach, in a sort of head coach sort of way, but it certainly wouldn't get you too excited, would it? So it'll be interesting. sounds always cliched and obvious to say, but it'll be interesting to see what approach we actually take, whether we go for a foreign coach who obviously hasn't got pre-season.
I think we are. I think that's what we're going to do. I can't see us going. I can't see us going down the British route or the experienced manager route. I think they've been dying to bring somebody in who's a trendy coach, like somebody who's used to working in a sort of a more European football club where the structure we've got right now, it's just the way things are at these clubs. I'm convinced it's going to be. I mean, there's a really funny tweet here from @Weir's cousin, who I think is a Wigan fan actually, but he's tweeted, Sunderland's philosophy on signing kids to sell for profit probably doesn't suit Mowbray. I reckon they've got an absolute turbo nerd lined up. Some 34-year-old graduate from the University of Dresden called Jens will be in by the weekend. I mean, it's funny, but everyone's expecting it. Everyone's expecting just like a sort of somebody we've never really heard of.
Well,
but I think that's what they've wanted to do for a while now.
No, I completely agree with you. And if we were sat here in pre-season, I would be 100% on board with that. I think somebody coming in from overseas with the run of fixtures that we've got in the middle of winter, where training's going to be tricky, and we've got game upon game upon game. It's the busiest time of the season, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a real baptism of fire for anybody coming in, and it's going to be difficult for anyone. But coming in, if you've got no experience of the Championship, no experience of English football, it's going to be even harder. So I'll caveat all that by saying whoever we do bring in, it won't have been a rush decision. This will be somebody whose name's been on their radar for 9-12 months. This is somebody who'll have been under scrutiny, under the microscope, research being done on over the past 6-9-12 months. It's not going to be somebody who they just search on Wikipedia now for out-of-work managers. Well, he sounds all right. Let's get him in. He looks the part. It's not going to be that sort of approach where, that we've had in the past, to be fair, with some owners. So anybody who they bring in will have done the due diligence on, they will have done the homework on, be confident that they can come in and do a job. But if you're a manager, and this is why I don't think it'll be Struber or Farioli, because if you're a manager who's doing well at another club, and you look at the prospect of coming to us with a team that needs picking up off the floor, a style of play that needs a lot of work, a tough run of games coming up, and you go, everything could be against me in 6 games' time. Because, you got West Brom, Leeds, Hull, Coventry, whoever else we've got, and obviously the game against Newcastle coming up. It's a tough run of fixtures for a new manager to come in and take charge. Now, if he gets us through that and picks up form and all that sort of stuff, brilliant. But, there's that chance, isn't there, where you come in and you don't have an impact. The players like Clark or whoever, there might be some of them who love Mowbray. Yes, we talked about some of them who he might have fallen out with and evidently has fallen out with, and who aren't too sorry to see him go. But there'll be players in there who want him to stay, who were playing well. And, as I say, Jack Clark's probably a prime example of a player who's really developed well under Tony Mowbray. So you've got all of those dressing room politics to work out and get everybody on side as well. So it's a massive job. And I think, it's a completely different proposition to bringing somebody in pre-season. So, there's part of me kind of thinks, will we bring somebody in just for the rest of the season? Just to get somebody in, steady the ship. All right, we'll probably, the way things are looking, it will be a push to get into the playoffs again this season. But, a good run of form, like we saw under Roy Keane when he was in charge, that good run of form in New Year can skyrocket you up the league and achieve all sorts. So you certainly wouldn't rule it out. But is it more about, the future, or is it about this season? And I think it's, obviously those two things are intertwined. But I say it's going to be a tough job for any manager coming in. And somebody who's inexperienced in English football and the Championship, it's a huge job.
Yeah, well, Struber isn't, is he? He was at Barnsley. I'm just sort of grabbing his name there, but he has managed in the Championship at least. But we'll see, I guess. I mean, I'm not going to speculate too much on names because really I'm expecting a quick turnaround on the appointment, and we might as well end it here because I'm sure we'll be back pretty sharpish once the new manager is actually in place and we can actually talk about what we've got coming up, because like you've just said, they've got a tough job on whoever they bring in, but I'm expecting this to turn around quickly. I mean, they could shock us and do another Alex Neil situation where it just takes weeks for them to bring somebody in, but I have a suspicion by if it's not in the morning, the next day we're going to have somebody here.
I think you're right, because it would have been very easy for them to continue with Tony Mowbray for the next couple of games. It would have been dead easy to leave him in charge against West Brom and Leeds. Of course, then the risk 2 wins derailing all of the plans, don't they? If I've got somebody lined up. But yeah, as I say, I do at this point, I do expect somebody else to be appointed by the time we take on West Brom on Saturday. And yes, hopefully this podcast gets to listeners before we do the next one. Chances are they'll be talking about the new manager, and hopefully we know something about him. So we will see what happens. You never know, do you?
We never know.
It's interesting.
Yes, let's see what happens. Well, cheers for joining us at this late hour for me, early one for you, I'm guessing. Cheers, mate.
That's all good. Cheers, Gav.
And cheers to listeners. Thanks for joining us. I'll not plug anything because this is literally an emergency pod. Just buy the book and donate to the Soup Kitchen, please, on our fundraiser. That would be great. We'll see you. We'll see you at some point in the coming days, I'm sure. Catch you later.